Welcome. Today is 4/20, guys. April 20th, 2022, and what better way to end the day than to smoke a little while learning a little history. So, I'm going to be watching and reacting to the Puff Puff Pass Dark History of Cannabis by Bailey Sarian. If you guys would like to watch along, just look up Bailey Sarian Murder Makeup Mystery. She's very popular. So, anyways, you guys can watch along or you can just listen because I will have this going as I'm talking. And anytime she says these three words, I'm going to take a puff off camera because no social media allows you to do it still. Even though it's legal, people are just unpleasant about it. Anyways, let's get into it already, guys. Oh, wait, hold on. I gotta go get snacks. Hold on. Okay, we have tea, snacks, joint. Let's get started. Hopefully this green light doesn't bother you guys. I just wanted to use it just in the spirit of 420. So, I hope you guys like the makeup. Here, let me go out of this color just so you guys can see it real quick. A little green on my eyes, green on the lips. Can't do too much because you don't want to go all out. I did have fake lashes and stuff on, but I took all that off because I want to be able to see it. And then here shortly I'll be taking these off probably because they're already starting to fall off. I've had it on all day. So back to the green light. And let me hold on.
Hi friends, I hope you're having a wonderful day today. My name is Bailey Sarian and I'd like to welcome you to the Library of Dark History. Now this is a safe space for all the curious cats out there who think, hey, is history really as boring as it seemed in school? Oh, nay, nay. This is where we can learn together about all the dark, mysterious, dramatic stories our teachers never told us about. You get it, I hope. Joan over here, she's got a little joint going. I've got my little weed robe. Feeling very Mother Nature right now. What do you guys think? Well, if you're listening, just imagine that something's going on. I don't know. Whip up some nachos, slip on the biggest hoodie you got, bust out some eye drops, and melt into your couch because today's episode is about the wacky tobacco, the sticky icky, the reefer, the old giggle smoke, the devil's lettuce, maybe? That's right. Today we're talking all about the dark history of cannabis. Woo! Now, when I was digging into the story, I did a lot of research. And we actually tried to film this episode once before. And I was like, you guys, we should smoke weed and film the episode. That would be so fun. And then, bitch, let me tell you real quick. I got so paranoid. I was on fucking Jupiter. And we were trying to film. And I was like, I gotta get the fuck out of here. And then I just bolted and...
It's so cool that she smokes too.
It wasn't a good idea. I don't recommend getting high and filming. At least not for me. Anyway, so I'm doing this again. Sober. Thank you so much. Joan here, you could smoke all you want. Did you know the word marijuana has a terrible racist past? Yeah, because actually it does. And we'll get into that a little bit. So I'm just going to call it cannabis because that's what it is. Weed comes from the cannabis plant, and she changed the world, really. But then some powerful villains in the United States decided this poor little plant was a criminal. Before we get to that, let's go way back and talk about what...
Sorry, I had to have a little coughing fit because you know how it is. Give me a second. Oh, back to it.
Cannabis. I'm going to open up my little dark history book to my favorite chapter. Oh, there it is. Nope, that's not it. Once upon a time, in about 12,000 BCE, in Central and South Asia, a little green flowering plant was born. Then around 8,000 BCE, research missions in Japan found some seeds that could grow this plant. Soon after they started growing it from the seeds, they gave her a name, which was cannabis, or is cannabis.
I can't tell what any of these
Now,
colors
some think
are.
she could be one of the earliest plants ever farmed by humans, but we know for sure a few thousand years later, around 4000 BCE, cannabis was definitely being farmed. But just as important as cannabis being grown was what they were growing it for. It's now the year 2500 BCE, and history has just started being recorded. Yes, cannabis has been on the scene longer than written words. So since things are being recorded, we find out around this time, fabric, clothes, and shoes were being made using cannabis in both China and Korea. Some even call it the first fabric known to man, and they were using something called hemp. It's basically the stem of the cannabis plant, which is peeled into long, thin fibers and then woven together. It's not too far off from a fine linen and can be used for all sorts of stuff. For example, when I was in high school, hemp necklaces were super popular. And this one hot guy, Dylan, he was like, "Did you know hemp is weed?" And I was like, "Shut up, Dylan. Oh my God. Stop, Dylan. You're so stupid, Dylan." Well, here's the thing. Hot Dylan was right. Weed and hemp are just two different names for cannabis. In the eyes of science, they're the same damn thing. But in the eyes of today's law, they couldn't be more different. This is the natural version of crack versus cocaine. But we'll get into that later on because early cannabis still has some surprising tricks up her sleeve. So cannabis decided fashion wasn't enough. She was like, "Hi, I'm going to do medicine now." And her best known chemicals, specifically THC and CBD, could help people sleep, make them euphoric, and act like an anesthetic, aka a painkiller. So cannabis was used during early versions of surgeries, and around 2000 BC, Persians mixed hemp seeds with beer to help menstrual cramps and other lady issues. Why are we not doing this now? The ancient Egyptians started using it for similar reasons too. Remember in our episode about menstruation? The Egyptians would mix it with honey and put it right up their old hoo-ha. And who are we to judge? Because, if it worked to get rid of period cramps, sign me the heck up. And while all this is going on, hemp was being used to create food like hemp milk and hemp seed. Plus, the Chinese were even using it to make an early form of paper. So, it's a very versatile little plant, isn't it? And with all these accomplishments under her belt, cannabis still isn't even known. So, cannabis had been hanging around the Middle East for a bit, and then in 800 BCE, she was found on a couple of religious altars in what is now present-day Israel. Because she was in a residue form, most believe cannabis was being used by people to get a little high during ceremonial or ritualistic events. But the oldest, most solid evidence of humans smoking weed was found in the mountains of western China. A stone-filled bowl with THC residue was found, and it dated back to about 480 BC. Wild. Earlier cannabis users either burned the plant and inhaled the smoke called vapors, or they just ate it. And yeah, I'm talking ancient edibles here. So from this point to the Middle Ages, every culture that comes into contact with cannabis dabbles in the drug's psychoactive properties. Whether it be for religious reasons or for just funsies, they were getting high. The oldest evidence we have recorded is from 440 BC, when a Greek writer known as the Father of History documented a nomadic tribe smoking hemp vapor and shouting for joy. So it's safe to say our girl cannabis was pretty revolutionary and popular. Think about it. For thousands of years, she kept people warm, fed them, numbed their pain, brought them closer to God, and reduced their anxiety during what I'm pretty sure weren't the easiest times to live through. I'd want to get high. Shit. So it just makes sense why nomads, traders, armies, and explorers took her from the grasslands of Central Asia into China, Korea, Japan, Russia, the Middle East, the Mediterranean, Europe, and south through Africa. In 1455, the Gutenberg Bible was published, which was not only the first mass-produced book sent all across the world, it was printed on hemp paper. Shit, that's wild. So things, again, are just going really great for cannabis at this time. In fact, things were really going well for cannabis for a long time. But what cannabis didn't know was that she was on a crash course with one continent that would put her into full crisis mode. Welcome to North America, cannabis. You're going to hate it here. But how did cannabis even get to the Americas in the first place? Some theories claim that cannabis hitched a ride to the continent back in 1492 with America's favorite colonizer.
When I say that it's stupid, that everywhere else was like, yeah, it's great, it's good for you. And America's the only one that's like, nah, we don't trust it.
Christopher Columbus. But those claims aren't really backed up by much. Plus, it seems like more bullshit to make Columbus seem cool, But there are some reports that cannabis first stepped ashore in the Americas, in Brazil and Chile, after a long-ass haul across the Atlantic from Africa. And then there were tales that Spanish conquerors introduced cannabis to Mexico to farm the hemp. Is one of these true? Are all of these true? I don't freaking know. There is no concrete research to tell us exactly when cannabis arrived, but we know she was here because production of hemp is on record in the 13 colonies. The farming of hemp was encouraged by local governments in the 1600s on the East Coast. They did this for a few reasons. It was a valuable thing that could be sold or turned into clothing. But the most important reason was that hemp could be used to help the growing military. It was a strategic move because hemp was used to make ropes, a material to seal the gaps in ships, and also canvas sails. Wow. Wow, just everything. Fun fact, the word canvas actually comes from the word cannabis. Ain't that some shit? Our girl was so important that in 1619, the territory of Virginia required every farmer to grow hemp, and other territories even allowed it to be exchanged as currency. This stuff was as in demand as actual money. And if that's not enough, there are even some theories that some of the earliest drafts of the Declaration of Independence were printed on hemp parchment as well. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and even Andrew freaking Jackson grew hemp on their plantations.
Nice.
Now, I know what you're wondering. Bailey, give us the tea. Were they smoking it? Were the founding fathers getting as high as Ben Franklin's kite? Unfortunately, there's no evidence of it, but come on. For growing it, you're just having it laying around. Maybe smoke it, right? At least try it once. Anyway, the United States was officially established as a nation in 1776, and by 1850, cannabis became a federally approved medicine. What a time to be alive. That same year, the U.S. Census reported 8,327 hemp farms growing cannabis for all sorts of uses. Now, in order to be counted, the farm had to be at least two.
Hold on. Hey, Google.
Licensed in 34 states in 2019, according to Vote Hemp.
There's only I have two phones and they both went into my name. So there's only 575 now. And what did she say? Hold on, let's go back.
Were the founding fathers getting as high as
we went back too far. Hold on.
Height? Unfortunately, there's no evidence of it, but come on. If you're growing it, you're just having it laying around. You're gonna maybe smoke it, right? You at least try it once. Anyway, the United States was officially established as a nation in 1776, and by 1850, cannabis became a federally approved medicine. Wow, what a time to be alive. That same year, the U.S. Census recorded 8,327 hemp farms growing cannabis for all
over
sorts of uses.
8,000 back then.
Now, in order to be counted,
and there's only
the farm had to be at
575
least
now.
2,000 acres. In total, that's at
What's
least
that say
16
about our government?
million acres of hemp. To put that in perspective, that's a bigger area than the size of all of West Virginia. Oh shit, that's big. We basically had a whole ass state dedicated to hemp. What happened? And then later in the century, cannabis started popping up as a beloved ingredient in a bunch of medicines that were sold directly to people in pharmacies. It was used to treat everything from migraines to inflammation to insomnia. So yeah, I mean, our girl Cannabis was out here killing it, just like she had been for thousands of years. When something is at the top of their game, a lot of people just want to see it come crashing down. We're going to pause for an ad break. Right now, work is taking up a large majority of...
I'm not gonna make you guys watch this. Hold on.
It also gained steam as a fashionable narcotic.
I actually
in the
watched it
United
because
States.
watching it helps the
Now, that wasn't
YouTuber,
just
but
word on the street. That exact phrase came from an
here we are.
1853 article in the New York Times. Along with this, people in the United States had also started to get into like the recreational use of smoking hash, which is a super potent form of cannabis. It's a dried resin that's pressed into small blocks. I mean, there were even hash parlors opening up alongside opium dens up and down the East Coast. I mean, that sounds like a good time. But because we can't have fun, we can't have nice things, a couple of dipshits came and ruined the party for everyone else. In 1884, the Baltimore Sun detailed the story of a guy who went to the hospital, stoned out of his mind on hash, just fucking high on shit, right? And told the doctor he couldn't find his face. His legs were gone. And he was walking on his chin. Yes. But reports like that made a lot of people afraid of cannabis. I don't know, that sounds like bath salts or something, man. And then the United States government took a step that sealed cannabis's fate forever. In the early 1900s, there was a growing push to regulate food and pharmaceuticals because some assholes were selling stuff and like lying about what was inside. And in order to protect consumers,
Still
the United
happens
States
today.
passed something called the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. This required drug labels to disclose any of 10 specific ingredients thought to be quote-unquote addictive or dangerous. Things like cocaine, right? Opium, heroin, they're on the list, and that makes sense. But because cannabis was now considered a narcotic, and there were reports of people walking on their chins, it also made the list of 10. While the law didn't ban anything, cannabis was now considered a poison. So our girl is catching a bad rap, and it only gets worse when blatant racism enters the picture. So for the next part of our story, we're going to hop on over to Mexico, specifically Mexico in the year 1910. Now, at this time, there was death and chaos in the streets of Mexico.
That peanut butter was so thick I couldn't open my mouth. I had to like get my drink. Woo! Russell Stovers, man. They ain't playing around. They give you a good portion of peanut butter. Back to it.
Mexico, I guess the country's dictator, who had been in power since 1876, had been overthrown. And what remained of the country's government were fighting against a bunch of rebel forces. This became known as the Mexican Revolution of 1910. Now, why is this so important to our story? Well, this revolution caused a wave of Mexican immigrants to pour into the United States because they were seeking refuge. But that's not what they got. Because along with their incredible culture, some brought with them their recreational use of cannabis. And remember, at this point, cannabis was considered poison. But like we mentioned earlier today, it's also used for so much other stuff. My God. Unfortunately, people started associating cannabis with incoming Mexican immigrants, and this caused fear in the United States, and they pushed anti-drug advocates to warn against the marijuana menace. That's what they're calling it. Horrible crimes that were being committed at the time were blamed on Mexicans who were using marijuana. I mean, it didn't matter if it were true or not. They just wanted someone to blame. Marijuana is definitely a word that comes from Mexico, but its true origins aren't entirely known for sure. One expert believes it comes from Mexican soldiers' slang for brothel, Maria Iguana. Oh. Other theories say it came from Chinese immigrants in Mexico. It could be a combo of syllables that refer to cannabis in Chinese, marenhua, or maybe it came from an informal way of saying Chinese oregano in Spanish, which is mejorana chino. Don't come for me, okay? We're trying. So the word marijuana could have come from a lot of different things, really. But back in the 1800s, most references in the press to cannabis refer to her medical benefits or how hemp makes cool shit like fabric, rope, and paper, so they used the scientific name. But then, in the early 1900s, major outlets like the LA Times took racism and anti-cannabis stances mainstream. And this is when we really start to see the M word gain in popularity. For example, they published a story titled Delirium or Death, Terrible Effects Produced by Certain Plants and Weeds Grown in Mexico. So, marijuana started to become tied to Mexicans who were then stereotyped as dangerous pot smokers. And then just fanned the prejudiced flames and led to racism and anti-immigrant feelings in the United States, which I'm sure we can all agree is insane, for a lot of reasons, but also because cannabis was legal to trade over the border and was being grown, sold, and used by white people in the United States. So, a little double standard, wouldn't you say? So let's recap. Cannabis,
it is America.
badass wonder plant, a goddess, a beautiful creature, a gift sent from the Jesus above. Baby Jesus sent us this beautiful plant.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did.
But then she got labeled addictive and dangerous, and then racism got involved. So the stage is set for like the darkest years in cannabis's life, her formal criminalization. But the road to getting that done was long and difficult. So difficult that it requires a gang of villains we've actually talked about before on this show. Now, they didn't know each other at first, but soon they would get to know each other. Because with their powers combined, they're going to make life in the United States a nightmare for a lot of people. So buckle up for the most toxic villain crossover this show has ever seen. First, we have to pause for an ad break. I know. BRB.
I think maybe a lot of us can agree that buying gifts for mothers can be.
Now, remember, cannabis has been a huge part of the American economy for a really long time. Whether cannabis was used for fabrics, goods, food, medicinal purposes, or even making the paper in the freaking Bible, a lot of people had jobs in the cannabis industry. And even more people relied on those products themselves every day. So if a powerful group has the goal of completely erasing cannabis from the country, they're going to have to do it systematically. They're going to have to attack from 4 very important angles: the press, the banks, big business, and finally, the government. It's like, why do they want to ruin this so bad? We learned about the marijuana menace bullshit earlier back when people were blaming the Mexican refugees for crimes. But even the United States government was pushing out anti-cannabis propaganda, solidifying the shaky connection between cannabis and Mexican immigrants. And because it was from the government, it validated a lot of the toxic myths already out there while continuing to keep racist stereotypes alive and well. But this PR campaign from hell really got a shot in the arm from someone we've met in this show before. The first villain in our gang, who I'm going to call the dude involved in cannabis killing, aka Dicks, because that's what they are, is none other than Mr. William Randolph Hearst. Remember him? Yellow Journalism episode? The Castle House, remember? I've been there. Did I tell you? I went to the Hearst Castle. Really cool. Yeah, he's a bad guy, but really cool house. I live there. Anyways, when we left our boy William, he was fighting with Joseph Pulitzer and started the Spanish-American War, all while creating a worldwide media empire. So who better to spread insane propaganda than Mr. Sensationalism himself? Lying in his own newspapers was second nature to him, but this time there was a huge financial reason to do it. You see, William had investments in the timber industry. Chopping down trees so they can be turned into newspapers. Great for William, terrible for Earth. But then a big-ass problem shows up for William. Because remember how I said earlier that paper can be made from hemp? After slavery was abolished, the hemp industry hit some rough times because hemp required a lot of labor to be farmed and processed. The formerly enslaved did most of that work because #USA. But something called the decorticator was invented, and this sexy new machine changed the game. It kind of automated the whole system of processing hemp. It became easier, and it didn't need as much labor. And this meant that hemp paper was made faster, cheaper, and more sustainably than wood paper, which Earth is like, yay, great. But William, no, he wasn't happy. He's like, fuck that. With his timber investment starting to face tough competition, William is looking for any way to take down the hemp industry. Now, this guy hates losing money. I mean, have you seen his house? He needs the money. I mean, like, he needs that money, okay? In addition to this, William's politics when it came to Latin America were pretty clear. He felt it should be conquered and taken over by, the white people. He is on record saying, quote, "I really don't see what is to prevent us from owning all Mexico and running it to suit ourselves," end quote. And this was something he was actively trying to do. Some estimates say he owned 7.5 million acres of land in Mexico. And because of his win-at-all-cost mentality, William had the disgusting idea to use his journalism empire to kill two birds with one stone. Save his timber investment and help spread hate towards Mexican immigrants so he can get more land. He's got to build more houses. Have you seen his house? The castle? Have you been there? We should do PR for that. In 1923, a paper owned by William reported that marijuana is a shortcut to the insane asylum. And if people smoke joints, the brain will be nothing but a storehouse for horrid spectators. Oh, shit. There were also reports that, quote, "the devil marijuana weed caused violence." Oh, shit. Dasters. Then in 1928, William ramped it up a bit with one of his papers reporting that marijuana was known in India as the murder drug, and people who were stoned would run through the streets, hacking and killing everyone. And then in another claim, this guy's just going. He's like, all the hits. Boom, boom, boom. Because in another claim, an article said just a small gardening box full of cannabis could, quote, "drive the whole population of the United States stark, raving mad." I think it's safe to say this William guy has never smoked weed.
He needs
tried
to.
it before being so mental. And what's even worse, all these crazy-ass headlines sold more papers and made William even richer. Shame. 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 I think I've made this very clear. So when William started banging the racist drum, screaming that marijuana is going to kill everyone, he planted the seed that Mexican immigrants and their drug were going to kill everybody. Oh, yes. And it's easier to fear something if there is a human face tied to it. Suddenly, white United States citizens become scared shitless, and they start to turn on cannabis, which is what William wanted. What William wanted most was to make it all illegal. And this was not something William could do on his own. He needed help. And this is how we meet our next villain from our gang of dicks, D-I-C-K-S. So let me introduce to you Mr. Andrew Mellon. Andrew was born on March 24th. March!
I need more snacks. Silly rabbit tricks on our kids.
Shh. All the villains are born in March, it seems like. There's something up with March. Andrew was born on March 24th.
Listen, my daughter was born March 26th, so let's not say that. Maybe it's a man thing.
Birth 1855 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In
No,
1874,
she wasn't.
after graduating
February
from
26th. What am I
Western
talking about?
University. Okay, Andrew,
She was due March
founded the
26th.
family business. That business was started by his dad and was called T. Mellon and Sons Bank. I don't know why Mellon's making me giggle. I just keep thinking of titties. And I'll tell ya, the business was pretty good. To this day, the Mellons are one of the richest families in the United States. Oh, shit. But this isn't about the family. It's about Andrew, okay? He was so good at the finance stuff that his dad just gave him the bank in 1882 when Andrew was just 26. Must be nice.
Yeah.
Over the course of the next 30 years, Andrew took what his dad started and turned it into a powerhouse in the United States banking world. I mean, tons of corporations turned to him for cash. As the United States developed into the early 1900s, Andrew and his bank were involved in hugely important industries like oil, steel, electricity, aluminum, shipping, and booze. So you get it, Andrew was a financial and industrial titan. The Mellons were huge. This guy was connected. And by the early 1920s, he was one of the richest dudes in the United States. Good for you. Okay, so now you know Andrew. Banking, powerful, got it. So under Andrew's watch, T. Mellon and Sons rebranded and became known as Mellon Bank. It was one of the biggest banks at the time, and they had a very important client. See, there was one industry I left out when I listed everything Andrew was involved in. That industry was petrochemicals. So this is where we welcome back to the show one of the most destructive and dangerous villains I've had the privilege of talking shit about. The third member of our gang of dicks is none other than the DuPont Company. Circle back to episode 1. Wow. We did it, Joan. We did that callback all the way to episode 1. Iconic. That was pretty good. DuPont, did you guys watch that episode? That's my favorite episode for sure. That one, administration. I like this one too, but check those out too. Okay, you get it. All you need to know for this story is that DuPont was, and still is, a chemical company that, along with other stuff, developed synthetic fabrics from fossil fuels. And they were behind a huge-ass scandal where they poisoned the drinking water in West Virginia. Some aqua tofana shit. Anyway, DuPont banked with Andrew. That means he'd lend them money so they could operate their company. If DuPont did well, so did Andrew. If they shit the bed, so did Andrew. And Mellon Bank was most invested in DuPont's process of turning wood fiber into paper. Maybe you see where this is going? Now, Mellon's investments started to look pretty bleak when the United States Department of Agriculture concluded that hemp paper was favorable in comparison with those made with wood pulp. Hemp paper didn't turn yellow as it aged, whereas wood paper covered in chemicals did. Chemicals bad, who would have thought? And not only this, but an acre of hemp could make more paper than an acre of trees. Plus, on top of that, hemp grows 4 times faster than trees do with half the amount of water, which means it replaces itself faster than trees do. So as hemp gets harvested, there will be less damage to the environment because there's less of a need to knock down trees and just wait for them to grow back to make more paper. But guess who got his wood-based paper from DuPont? Stop the presses, because it's William Randolph Hearst. Have you seen his castle? It's wild. Like William, hemp was seriously threatening DuPont and Andrew's bottom line. The dark forces are starting to align. So a few years pass, then Andrew became the Secretary of Treasury in 1921, smack in the middle of Prohibition. Now, in this position, Andrew handled all financial matters for the U.S. government. So he holds some serious freaking power. And even though he technically became a civil servant, he stayed involved with his bank and remained tight with DuPont. It's like a conflict of interest, right? So it's around this time when our 3 established villains start to mingle. Now, we don't know for sure if Andrew and William colluded directly on this next part, but a lot of interesting coincidences had to happen. In the late 1920s, DuPont was making this amazing new product that we all know today. It was called nylon. Oh, yes. But other companies were making a competing product for way cheaper. The main ingredient? Hemp. So now cannabis is affecting 2 products for DuPont, paper and nylon. Oh, they're fucking pissed, right? So one day, Andrew was sitting in his office at the Treasury Department when he remembered, wait a minute, it's Prohibition. Cannabis, like alcohol, was one of those 10 things listed as addictive or dangerous by the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906. And alcohol is now illegal. That's when Andrew gets his big-ass light bulb moment. Why not make cannabis illegal? So in 1930, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics was established. It was a division within the Treasury Department, which Andrew oversaw. And Andrew had to appoint a director of narcotics. And yes, that's where the word narc comes from. It meant narcotics officer. Anyway, it didn't take long for Andrew to come up with a man who was perfect for the job. Okay, so now we're going to introduce the final member of our gang of dicks. A devout racist we met before in the jazz episode. Wow, they're just all coming together like a boy band. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Harry Anslinger. Now, if you remember, Harry loved Prohibition, super big fan. And once he was appointed, he saw the gig as a solid career opportunity. He found himself running an agency that was able to define the drug problem and then solve it. So he had the ability to make up some BS to stay employed. And that's exactly
The cat was going crazy and he was tearing up my carpet. Back to it.
what he did. Now, opiate and cocaine use wasn't enough to build his agency, and cannabis was way more popular. So he shifted focus and started the ball rolling on making cannabis illegal. To bring attention to this problem, he fanned the flames of mass hysteria, violence, and racism using something called the Gore Files. Sounds good. These files were a collection of quotes from police reports about graphic and brutal stuff supposedly committed by people high on cannabis, like people axe-wielding psychos, grandmas getting shot, and families being murdered, often committed by people of color. But here's the thing. Lots of people believe Harry just invented the connection between these crimes.
So, cocaine and all that is related to the colored, and marijuana is related to the Mexicans. But we had nothing to do with it.
In the cannabis use. And there were 200 crimes listed in this thing called the Gore Files. Some historians say 198 of them, so almost all of them, falsely blamed cannabis. And that's funny. And even the final 2 were in question. So Harry,
I'm tired.
I don't know, man. It's not adding up. But still, he frequently read from and promoted the Gore Files, which received a ton of support from William Hearst. Have you seen his castle? It's incredible. Harry's anti-cannabis reports were filled with such open racism that a bunch of politicians called for his immediate resignation. And guess what? He's like, nope, and didn't resign. So this piece of garbage ran a major federal department for 32 years, which leads us to a little thing called reefer madness. That sounds like a party. In 1936, a film called Reefer Madness was created by a church group, produced with the support of Harry and his Bureau of Narcotics, and then distributed nationwide on the educational film. But educational it was not. It was a silly-ass piece of propaganda, and it really hyped up the anti-cannabis hysteria spewing from our gang of dicks. And because there weren't a ton of movie options at the time, it made its way to the general public. Here's the plot of the movie, because it's a good one. It's wild. So, some innocent high schoolers, they get lured into trying cannabis. And because they're high, they experience a cartoonish series of events that includes a hit and run, manslaughter, suicide, attempted rape, and a kid who literally loses his freaking mind. But the film seemed official and educational, so, of course, a lot of Americans out there ate it up. They're like, oh my god, have you heard of this cannabis thing? The public perception of cannabis was worse than it had ever been because of this stupid movie, Reefer Madness. And as a result, a real shitstorm for cannabis arrived. In 1937, Harry testified in front of Congress armed with deceptive Gore Files, a bunch of William Hearst sensational articles, and a heaping pile of racism. Harry explained why marijuana needed to be banned. His whole argument was that it led to crime. He kept repeating the word marijuana over and over. It was also written in the actual legislation being proposed. But the attorney for the American Medical Association knew, what the hell was up. First, he said there is zero primary evidence that cannabis use causes crime. Second, he publicly scolded Harry for not emphasizing that this bill actually applied to cannabis, including hemp. The attorney knew Harry was using the word marijuana because it was tied to racism towards Mexicans, and cannabis was not. And this is how fear is weaponized, people, because it didn't matter what the American Medical Association said. Damage was done. That same year, Congress passed the Marijuana Tax Act, which effectively made possession of cannabis legal. So lame. Even though this happened, not everyone was a fan of the Marijuana Tax Act. In 1944, the New York Academy of Medicine issued a report that outright said marijuana did not induce violence, insanity, or sex crimes, or lead to addiction or other drug use. my God. No. Even in World War II, the Department of Agriculture started a Hemp for Victory program where the government gave farmers hemp seeds to grow. They'd use the fiber for military stuff like parachutes. So the government makes cannabis possession illegal, but then is telling people to grow it. It's like, what is it? Pick a lane, people, pick a lane. But the hypocrisy didn't matter because more laws were coming. And they cemented something in place that proved destructive to Black and brown communities all over the United States. Mandatory minimum sentences. Let's pause for a little ad break.
I think it's a great idea to keep learning new skills. I really want to learn this.
And that the Lord up above created. I don't think you could do that. This $20,000 fine is equal to $210,000 today. Then the Narcotics Control Act of 1956 got the death penalty involved. So this act made penalties even harsher for not just cannabis dealers, but addicts as well. Harry justified these wild punishments because he claimed cannabis was a stepping stone to drug addiction, or like maybe you've heard of this, a gateway drug, which we had already known for 12 years was absolutely not true. But by the time Harry retired in 1962, a bunch of baby box acts popped up in individual states, some of them even tougher on cannabis than the federal laws. For example, in Louisiana, simply possessing cannabis could land you in prison for 5 to 99 years. Holy shit. Some states were even passing out life sentences and the death penalty. What do you even say to that? That's so sick. So, Harry, remember he retired in 1962, thank God, right? Well, a few years back, Andrew Mellon, he died in 1937, followed by William Hearst in 1951. Great castle, still there. Harry met his maker later in 1975. Tragically, the DuPont company is still alive and well. Hey, DuPont. How's it going? But for our story, this is when the dicks are eliminated from Fuckboy Island. Things start to look a bit better for cannabis. So attitudes towards cannabis changed, in the 1960s. And it wasn't just because of the Grateful Dead. Reports from both the Kennedy and Johnson administrations found something we already knew. Cannabis is not a gateway drug, nor does it cause violence. So policy began to include options for treatment.
I'm messing around now. I'm listening.
Penalties.
I'm listening now.
It's a step in the right direction, I guess. So why did this happen? Cannabis became popular among white middle-class college kids. That's it. For decades, cannabis laws targeted Mexicans and African Americans, but the country didn't care. As soon as all the Abbeys and Logans and they started smoking and getting pinched, all their parents were like, oh my God, this is so unfair. Can't do this to them. So shortly after this, Congress got rid of most of the mandatory penalties for cannabis-related offenses. They realized it did nothing to stop drug use and was just freaking harsh. It's funny what happens in their case. But the good news was short-lived because things once again take a turn for the worse for cannabis. It's almost as the dicks pass their toxic torch directly to another dick. Literally, President Richard Nixon. Or Tricky Dicky. Tricky Dick. I like Tricky Dicky. Nixon signed the Controlled Substance Act in 1970, and this one is important to know because it classified cannabis as a Schedule I narcotic, which it still is to this very day. Now, Schedule I narcotics are considered to be the most dangerous drugs. And of course, cannabis is on this list with drugs like freaking heroin. To put it in perspective, how insane
nothing
that
like
is,
it.
the list of Schedule II substances include meth, PCP, fentanyl, and cocaine, meaning they are considered safer and more medicinal. Girl, what happened?
No.
How these drugs were categorized had nothing to do with cannabis or science. I'm paraphrasing a high-level Nixon administration official, but it was because they wanted to criminalize being counterculture and being black. But since they couldn't criminalize a movement or a person, they associated them with drugs, which they could criminalize. This Nixon official went on to say, quote, We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. And whoa. And there you have it. Great. And then in 1971, President Nixon labeled drug abuse public enemy #1 and announced to the world the start of the war on drugs. To put it simply, Nixon hated two groups of people. People who were against the Vietnam War and people who were black. But here's the thing, wars end, being black does not. It does need to be said that there were some people fighting the good fight on behalf of cannabis in the 1970s.
Okay.
It wasn't all complete shit. The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, or NORML, was founded in 1970. Now, they're the oldest and largest cannabis advocacy group in this country, and they provide a voice of reason against anti-cannabis propaganda coming from the government. So during the 70s, despite all of Nixon's efforts, they helped decriminalize cannabis in 11 states. They're still hard at work today, and we love them for it. I just feel like I was so sad. Like, yeah. In 1976, a study was made by Dr. Ernest Small that established the difference between cannabis and hemp. You ready to find out what the difference is? The only difference between cannabis and hemp was how much THC was in it. If it had less than 0.3% THC, it was hemp. More than that, cannabis. And you're probably thinking, well, why 0.3%? Well, Dr. Small himself said he randomly picked a number. I love this country. America! We are so great. Well, unfortunately, the government just they ran with it. They're like, sure, sounds great. And this leads us to our final player in cannabis's downfall. Everything the Dix and Nixon did set the table for this person. And my God, did he screw up a lot of people's lives. But first, we're going to pause for one more ad break, baby. What do U.S. News, PC Magazine, and Popular, far worse than cannabis, but Reagan didn't think so. Having 100 cannabis plants got a person the same penalty if they got caught with 100 grams of heroin. Reagan is telling America cannabis is as bad as heroin. And then Reagan put in place a policy called 3 strikes and you're out, which triggered an automatic life sentence in prison for repeat drug offenders. So if a person was found with half a joint 3 times, their life was over. And Reagan's like, well, they just should have said no. Speaking of which, there was an ad campaign, an educational program started in the 1980s called Just Say No. And guess who created it? Reagan's wife, Nancy. This whole campaign was geared towards stopping kids from using drugs, and that anyone doing drugs was scary. Now, it's hard to oppose a program that says they just want to keep kids safe, right? Yeah, everyone does. But what came out of Just Say No was anything but helpful. Some studies suggest that kids in those programs were more likely to try alcohol and drugs. Also, it taught kids to stigmatize people who use drugs, as if every single one of them is actively in control of their addiction and are bad people. So, while President Reagan was empowering cops, prosecutors, and judges, Nancy was making her way into schools and living rooms, putting the fear of God and government into the people. You know that one commercial that's like, this is your brain. Now this is your brain on drugs. And then the girl smashes an egg into the frying pan. Yeah, that was Nancy. That was Nancy. She was like, this is a great idea, you guys. I love it. So, all that progress made by NORML and other cannabis advocates at the state and federal levels went out the window. Goodbye. Cannabis laws passed in the 1980s were like nothing this country had ever seen. Law enforcement got bigger budgets and were more empowered to lock people up. After people were arrested, punishments were significantly harsher than they were in the 1930s during all that reefer madness. And oversight was laughable, if it was even present at all. All the tools used to fight heroin and cocaine were now directed primarily at cannabis. The government pulled out all the stops. I mean, not to mention the president after Reagan, George Bush Sr., he doubled down on the war on drugs. He just kept pushing the false
It's funny because
destructive
their
narrative.
parents
as did a few
possibly
of the
did
presidents
drugs.
who followed him. So, what
They
did the
grew
legalization
drugs.
of cannabis get us? Well, in 2018, more than 43% of all drug arrests, about 700,000 to be exact, were related to cannabis. In that same year, according to the FBI, cops made more arrests for cannabis crimes than for all violent crimes combined. And while arrest rates for cannabis possession were lower in 2018 than in 2010 for both black and white Americans, black people were still getting arrested more. According to the NAACP, just 5% of illegal drug users are African American, but they make up 33% of people in jail for drugs. The kicker? All races of people use cannabis roughly at the same rate in the United States. Over the past couple of decades, the public has warmed up to the idea of legal cannabis. I mean, most people no longer think of it as this menace it once was painted to be, you know? How do we know? Well, according to a 2021 Pew Research poll, 91% of Americans are in favor of legalizing cannabis for recreational or
I'm the
medical
35% that uses it
91%.
for medical.
I don't think that many Americans have agreed on
I think that's what it
anything
said.
ever.
30-something
Yeah, I don't
percent.
think so. Wow. Yeah, that's wild, you guys. Who's the other 9%? Douche. Anyway, despite nationwide support, on the federal level, cannabis is still a Scheduled 1 narcotic, unjustly hanging out with PCP. That's insane, right? Absolutely. This
Love
is like
it.
a joke, but it's not, unfortunately. Medical cannabis is now legal in 37 states,
Illinois.
and recreational cannabis is legal in 18
Is not
states.
one of them.
And Washington, D.C.
Did not know that.
While this is incredible progress, it shines a light on a painfully ironic issue. Overwhelmingly white-owned companies are growing cannabis, building edible factories, and selling the product out of storefronts all over the freaking country. They're capitalizing on this booming industry. Meanwhile, a lot of black and brown Americans are still sitting in prison for minor cannabis crimes. And the people and communities hit the
They're going
hardest
to
by
take
the
their
war on
old sweet
drugs
time getting
are
them
being
out,
left
too.
out of this billion-dollar industry.
If
In
they
fact,
even get them
legal
out.
cannabis brought in $18.3 billion in 2020. I mean, cannabis has over 25,000 uses, so the possibilities are endless. But because the federal government continues misusing science, they still believe that cannabis is the devil's lettuce. Well, my friends, that is today's episode about marijuana, aka cannabis, aka the devil's lettuce, aka
The hell?
you know,
Who's in
you
my
get it. Thank
kitchen?
you. I feel very bad for cannabis because she does so many great things and so many products can be made out
Don't
of
be
her.
messing with that light.
For some fucking reason, it's still banned. We could be making so much stuff here in America if we just started growing hemp, right? Paper, clothes, everything. I mean, yeah, the bird agrees. Joan. Go off, Joan. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, do your own research, of course, but the one thing you'll find out is that for years and years and years, centuries and centuries, whatever, it's been used for so many things. It's such a good thing. I don't know.
And as she said, it's
But
gross
we have the power
faster
we can
than
go
trees
we
and
can
stuff,
make
so-
this legal, right? But I also wish we should be demanding that those in jail get lesser sentences, are released, are expunged, their records expunged. I mean, my God, it's disgusting. And that should be top priority on our list. I'm going to leave down in the description box some places that we can go to help further educate ourselves on it, how we can help, and further information if you're looking, you should look into helping because there's so many people who need our help.
I will try to leave
Thank
the
you for
same
learning
links
with me
down
today.
below.
Remember, don't be afraid to ask questions and get the whole story because you deserve that. Anyways, I'd love to hear your reactions to the stories, so make sure to use the hashtag #DarkHistory.
So if you guys have watched it along with me, please let me know what you guys think. I let my opinion flow throughout the entire video. My daughter is still awake, so I'm going to go take care of that right now. I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you guys want to see next. Good night.